Welcome to today's webinar on the business of professional betting. My name is Michael Donoghue, Head of Distribution at Waterhouse VC. We've got something pretty special lined up today, I think, a rare look inside professional betting with someone who's built a successful operation from the ground up. We'll go into a few things like the work that goes into finding an edge, managing risk, building a sustainable business, and scaling up in what is a pretty competitive space. Joining me today are first Tom Waterhouse, Founder and Chief Investment Officer at Waterhouse VC. Many of you joining today will know Tom's background, but just very briefly, Tom ran a bookmaking operation at the track in the 2000s, built a fast-growing online betting business, sold that to William Hill, served as the CEO of William Hill Australia, and for the past 6 years has been at the helm of Waterhouse VC, investing in technology companies within the gambling ecosystem. Welcome, Tom. And also with us today is Tom Dry. He's a special guest today. He runs a professional betting syndicate focused on tennis. Tom cut his teeth working for one of the biggest betting operations in the world before venturing out on his own. We'll hear more about his journey very shortly. Welcome, Tom Dry. A quick word about Waterhouse VC before we begin. We manage an investment fund focused on what we call the technology layer of the global gambling industry. So the businesses supplying software, data, services to the gambling operators. It's a segment of the industry with a lot of growth. It plays to our strengths in being able to source and analyze these opportunities. The fund has delivered returns of over 90% annually before fees for almost 6 years now. So if you'd like to learn more about that fund, please just visit our website, or you can drop me an email after the webinar. And of course, a quick disclaimer before we get stuck in. Today's session is intended for wholesale investors only. Everything we discuss today should not be considered investment advice or betting advice for that matter. And I should also mention that Waterhouse VC has a financial interest in Tom Dry's business. If you have any questions during our discussion, please just look at that question tab in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Pop any questions in there during the presentation. I'll either weave them into our conversation during the presentation, or we'll just leave them to the end and we'll have a dedicated time for Q&A. I'd love to understand a bit more about your where you were in your journey and how you first got interested in betting.
Thanks, Mike. I can't actually pinpoint the first moment when it became more serious for me. I mean, the very first bet I ever struck was probably, I was about 9 years old at Goodwood Racecourse, and my parents had probably given me £10, £20 or so to use at the track. And we were all there as like a family day out. And I remember backing a horse called Ringmore Down at 8-1, which came in, and I was 9 years old, and I'd gone and collected my money, and it was the best feeling ever. I can't remember really when I sort of stepped it up. After university, I started doing a little bit of betting on football. And at this point, I was really struggling to find a job in the real world. And just really by complete chance, I never considered a career in betting. I didn't think any existed beyond working for a bookmaker. My dad found an advert for a London betting syndicate called London company and betting syndicate called StarLizard, and I did a little bit of reading online. There's not much to be found, and I just couldn't believe it existed. And at this point, all the other avenues I was pursuing, like, the regular stuff people would do, like finance, it just went out the window. At this point, I decided that, I wanted to work on edges in betting. And I was really lucky to get a job at StarLizard, and that really kicked it all off. And
I don't know how much you can say about that job, but was it a great environment to sort of learn the craft?
So I was there between 2017 and 2019. my job, roughly speaking, was to kind of adjust the model for the particular team specific, player specific stuff that affected that particular match. So the model is like a broad general thing which estimates team strengths kind of on average, and it's blind to all the random things that can happen in football, such as like motivation, team news, all of these things. So my job, and this actually latterly became very important, in my career. But yeah, my job was to kind of adjust the model and make sure that the kind of final numbers that the StarLizard would use for their betting were very accurate. And that's definitely something I've taken with me massively to this day, in not sort of idolizing models and understanding that they, wouldn't say they only win, but they're definitely most powerful when they've, been sense checked sort of rigorously, and you've included every single sort of factor and adjustment you can think of. And it's that kind of combined process that actually makes money, not just the model.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I actually deviated from your question, but the environment was absolutely unbelievable. So I think the most unique thing about it, from my perspective, being sort of 22 when I started, was just how receptive everybody was to new ideas, even if they were terrible and they'd been tried and failed, or they were just non-starters. People just, there was no sort of concept of hierarchy, or I don't know, there's another word for that, but sort of how to put it, I guess people were not just trying to sort of get ahead of one another by doing odd things, or sending pretty emails, things like this, like you might see in normal corporate jobs. All everyone wanted was just the best for the syndicate. Sure. Because we were cutting to that. And so if someone had a good idea, it doesn't matter if you're 22 or you're Tony himself, that gets heard. And so look, most of my ideas probably for the first year just terrible, but I got a chance to say them out loud, and that mattered a lot. And I really valued that experience immensely.
And then how did you make that decision to then, you're in this pretty good job, working for a pretty good place. How did you make that decision to then go out on your own and bet on your own?
It was a really tough decision, and mainly because I don't know how to say it. I worked constantly when I was at StarLizard. I didn't really follow the concept of like a contract or anything like that. And, it's kind of based around the football calendar anyway, so not really many people did, but I just loved the job. So I was there all the time, and I had some really good friends there, and guys I'd learned, a lot from, and were very kind and fair to me as I was sort of coming up. Just from the kind of emotional side, it was really tough to make that decision. I guess what swung it in the end is that the StarLizard syndicates having these bets, and I was fortunate enough to be a member of that syndicate and have exposure to these bets. But my own betting, which I was doing on sort of smaller sports like snooker and golf at this time, was just sort of ramping up to the point where it was becoming sort of, more meaningful for me than, the bets at work. And I was making money on these bets, not like inordinate amounts of money, but I was profitable, and I loved the, that sort of process of finding edges and executing bets. And it just, the pendulum swung, I guess is what I'm saying, towards my own betting. And to be honest, I probably had made that decision 3 or 4 months before I plucked up the courage to tell the guys at StarLizard that that's what I wanted to do. And that's how much that job meant to me. And they were also very, not just my friends, but the StarLizard sort of establishment was also very, very helpful to me in my early days, and they'd stay in touch and they were rooting for me and supported me. So, I have nothing but, positive things to say about that experience.
This might be a good time, Tom Waterhouse, for you to just talk about how you first met Tom Dry.
Yep. So we look at probably 30 businesses a week, and generally we're looking at businesses that are tech suppliers to the gambling space. But quite a few times we have seen businesses that are looking at finding an edge through data and think that they can sell that data to bookmakers. And some of them have a small edge. Some of them have just had a period of positive variance, and some of them have been con artists. But very rarely almost never do we come across anyone that's got a significant edge. But our group of investors are many of the heavyweights in the industry. And one of our industry investors said to us, look, they'd come across what they believed was the best tennis bettor currently in the world and said, you've got to meet this guy. He's a young guy, ultra impressive, and got a real edge. And coming from him, I thought, well, gosh, that's something. So I reached out to Tom and had an initial call with him, was blown away by the call. But even though my dad's been a professional bettor for 45 years, he's never had a losing quarter. It's not my area of expertise. But so I talked to my dad about him. I talked to other investors that were professional bettors in the space to get a gauge and see if they'd heard of Tom. I spoke to many bookmakers to get an understanding of, had they heard of him? Was he winning? Did he consistently win? Was he betting at the top of the market? How was he transacting with them? And then when Tom mentioned that he'd worked for Tony Bloom, very obviously, he's an industry legend, MBE from the Queen, and owns Brighton Football Club and probably the world's best soccer bettor. He very generously sung high praise of Tom and couldn't have been more complimentary. And that gave us great confidence, along with the way Tom interacted himself and the way he handles himself. We were very keen to progress in doing a deal with Tom. And Tom, very pleased to say you've exceeded all expectations.
Cheers, Tom.
I'm pretty interested, Tom Dry, in just understanding the process. So when you go out on your own, you mentioned you were betting on a couple of sports. What made you go, let's go all in on tennis?
When I left StarLizard, I kept up my snooker, which was kind of, I spent so long sort of building this snooker model, and I was really lucky that I approached somebody I'd never met on Twitter, who I've subsequently met in person, who gave me probably the richest snooker data set I've ever seen in terms of, I'm going to blow his cover now, but basically sort of ball by ball scoring of snooker frames. And he just gave it to me for nothing, just for the joy of sharing it. And that gave us a massive edge in snooker for a period. And at this point, I wasn't really, didn't have a particularly large bankroll. And so snooker was the world for me, because I could bet easily up to what I wanted on this one sport and do great. And it got to a point where, I wanted to bet more, but the snooker markets couldn't really take it. It's not a massive international sport. It's basically just UK and China, and you can't really access the Chinese market. Tennis was a sport I've played since I was a kid, and I'd grown up with my brother watching Federer lose sort of heartbreaking slam finals to Djokovic. And I mean, between us, we were peaking at watching sort of 80 or 90% of Federer's matches in certain seasons. And we played so much against each other. This is my brother, Harry. And I had never modeled snooker, never did any of that tennis when I was at StarLizard. I just had a hunch that if there was a sport that I could, a big sport with, strong liquidity that I could, sort of excel at betting on, then tennis might be it. And tentatively, I sort of, I kind of learned from what, Tony had done and what I sort of realized on snooker, which was that the foundation of a good model is, the foundation of a winning model is unique, sort of exclusive data that's being crafted by people who really understand the sport. And that's sort of what I set about trying to build on the tennis side. So yeah, it's a bit of a ramble, but I needed to move up the levels. Snooker was not quite, I continued to bet on it, but I was not going to make a magnificent living on snooker. And so, I kind of moved on to tennis.
Yeah, sure. And then I guess, you decide to move on to tennis. How do you go about deciding when to graduate from, say, paper trading or betting small amounts to, basically implementing the model in full? Like, do you decide that you need, an edge that, the market doesn't understand, or multiple edges? And what's the level of confidence that you need to get to before you start to do that?
It's a good question. I probably proceeded with more haste than your average person. I just felt like I would learn more quickly losing real money than losing imaginary money. And I felt like, look, if I'm betting on Betfair and I'm paying the commission, worst case, I might lose at 2 or 3%. I've just got no edge. I'm clueless. My bets are meaningless. Don't have any sort of, bearing on what the true probabilities are. That's still a scenario I can live with. And I found that preferable to sort of back testing, which, to be honest, to do that properly, you need to be extremely rigorous with how you construct your models, and very, very easy to think you've got an edge when you don't. So I'd just rather kind of jump in and have, probably quite a few bad bets and look at how the market actually responds to them, in sort of live mode, and figure it out from there.
Yeah, okay. And we've had a few questions come in already. One of them that's pretty common is people asking about data sources. Now, you obviously can't share the secret source or anything like that, but are you able to just talk more generally about how, what your approach is, I guess, maybe not even just on tennis, but just in general? Like, is it you're looking at more sort of player statistics, or is it more alternative things that maybe other people don't think about? Is it more creative than maybe just pure stats?
Let me think about how to answer that.
And you don't have to, of course.
I mean, I'll put it like this. I don't want to be too specific, but I think a lot of people feel unduly constrained by, they would approach this problem thinking, right, what data is out there? Mm-hmm. We can scrape this site, or we can purchase from this provider. And maybe these providers supply bookmakers or, basic statistics on there. And fine, it's nicely formatted and it's JSON and you can access their API and everything. But it's not really going to help you, solve the problem, you're working on particularly well. You want to work out what you think matters in tennis or in any sport, and then go about collecting the data to sort of test that hypothesis. So I guess I'm saying it's more of a carte blanche where, you make your own data.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know again, you can't really go into all the specifics and all the secret sauce, but like I know, for example, like Tom mentioned, his dad has been a professional punter for a long time, very data driven, but there's still human elements you take into account that feed into the modeling. For example, you might not, want to back a jockey when they're going through a divorce or something like that. Is there human elements that you look to take into account, or even just maybe knowledge of, or deep knowledge of the sport that you and the team take into account where, and then feed it back into the model?
Feed it back into the model is sort of a little bit of wishful thinking. There's so many things people have mentioned to me where I'm thinking, wow, like I'd love to test that. And in practice, the 11.5-month grind, like annual grind of betting tennis sort of obstructs that process. Without doubt, human elements. Look, there are going to be other groups who do great with more expansive models. I rely on a more, a little bit more of a bread and butter model, which I supplement with lots of human elements and sort of, expert opinions, my own take. I mean, just to give you one example, which you can kind of grab onto. One of my team is a French guy who has what I think of as a kind of crazy infatuation with China. He just absolutely loves China. And he thinks the CCP are, our saviors and the West is completely screwed. And maybe he's right about that. But anyway, he basically packed up his bags, went to Taiwan. He's decent now in Mandarin. And so he was based out there. We were working together, and he can access like the Chinese internet. And basically he found a bunch of, this was during COVID. So all of the Chinese players haven't been playing on tour because there've been like ultra sort of stringent lockdowns in China. And he found that they were sort of playing sort of shadow matches, like Chinese league stuff. I would never have found any of this. And he tells me, okay, look, the top two Chinese players at the time, Yibing Wu and Zhizhen Zhang, they've played each other like 10 times in the Chinese sort of, in the Chinese sort of national system. And Wu has beaten Zhang like nine times out of 10. And they emerge after COVID, and they're playing a challenger tournament in Italy or somewhere. I can't remember exactly. And just by complete luck of the draw, literally, Wu and Zhang are drawn to play in the first round. And Zhang is a bit more of an established player. So the bookies had him probably, 2-5, and Zhang's like 2-1 in sort of in their pricing. And we know that Wu's just owned the guy for the last year. He's literally beaten him 9 times out of 10. So I can't remember what price we made it, but I mean, it's just an example of collecting information from, different people, factoring stuff in, having a really great network, and, just lucky to work with so many good people who sort of pass these things along. Wu did actually win that match in straight sets, I think. So it was it was a big day for us.
There you go. Yeah. Can you also share that story you mentioned to me about the guy who plays exceptionally in the wind?
Well, there's a few players. I mean, the French player Richard Gasquet famously said he was born in the wind, and you actually watch him play, you'll kind of understand, because he has these arcing ground strokes off both sides, like massive net clearance, and can really manipulate the spin of the ball. And so, he said he's born in the wind. He said this was when he was way down in the rankings, sort of like 1 or 2 years ago. He said if the tour was played in the wind, he'd still be top 10. And so I think this is, that's somewhat sort of well known amongst like tennis gamblers now. But there's lots of there's lots of sort of funny scenarios like that where a player is going to be way sort of above or below their regular level because of certain circumstances.
There's also another factor in running the operation, right? Like it's not just being able to price and pick who you or what you think the odds are, but it's also getting those bets on, right? So, and that's been a question we get. It's probably been the most common question we've got before the webinar. Are you able to just talk about, I guess, challenges when you look to, actually implement the model in practice? Like, are there challenges that maybe, that your theoretical, how you be going about things theoretically versus in practice? What are the challenges there?
Let me think. I think anyone who's done this at a certain level would know that trust is extremely important. And if you want to sort of scale a betting operation, you're not going to be able to do that purely from, your sort of, geographic territory, because you'll saturate the market there too much. So it's important to build a little bit of a network and try and access sort of different liquidity. Tennis is lucky in that respect because most countries in the world will, host tennis tournaments. And so it made it very different to something like snooker. If you had to sort of rank my priorities, I'd say number one is sort of A grade sort of credit settlement. The worst thing is to sweat the bets twice when you have to hope your players win, and then you also have to hope to get paid. So the top one by a long way would be very good friends or people I've worked with for a long time who have always done the right thing, and I rate ethically to the absolute highest level. And I'm lucky to work with lots of people like that. I don't know, Mike, could you just expand a bit more? I know you're saying getting on, but just if
No,
you could
I think that makes sense. I think that's a good answer, to be honest. How do you think about the bankroll management and how much you would maybe risk on a given, match or tournament, or just like how much are you allocating to a bet?
I'd say 2 years ago, I was kind of, I was betting very aggressively. I thought I had a very big edge, and the market, could absorb those bets. Even if that edge was as strong today and the market could withstand the same, level of betting, I still don't think I'd do it like that again, because I don't know. It's kind of like there's a quote, like it's better to sleep well than to eat well. So there is just the stress of, any given day, or say if there's tournaments in the US or South America, and I don't stay up all night to watch them. And you wake up in the morning and you've lost like a massive chunk of your bankroll. It's not even losing. Well, losing is awful, but it's just the angst and anxiety around maybe losing it, and checking your phone, thinking, man, and then on top of that, you have that regret, like, okay, were these bets even good? And so I've tried to be a bit more conservative in the last few years. I think it's just down to your personal tastes to some extent.
We've got a question.
If you're following sort of Kelly literally, which I would no serious professional would ever do, then you could end up with enormous swings on a bet. Like if you make something 60% a true probability and you can back it at evens, Kelly's going to tell you to back 20% of your bankroll, which is no sane person. You'd be dead within a week, not just because of you lose a few bets and you're virtually dead, or you're ground down to just like pips. You'd be dead from the stress. So you've got to manage the whole thing, which is really your life, not just like a financial simulation.
Yeah, sure. There was a question that came through from Brendan. It sounds like you don't let a model completely determine the allocation of your bets. It sounds like that's basically.
I will just come in on that. Like, I'm much more fluid on things like that. I mean, it can come down to, firstly, it can come down to luck. I could ask a partner for a bet, and they may, just because the price is in the right point, or we have some opposition somewhere, we could just get filled for a lot of money, and you don't always have complete control of what's going to come back. Secondly, definitely there's no algorithm dictating this. It could be me as simple as me thinking, okay, I've personally watched the last 2 or 3 matches of these players, and I'm very confident this price is wrong. Obviously, the model thinks that, I think that, my team, backing that up. It could depend on like, okay, do we have one random piece of information sort of, maybe it's an injury read where we think, okay, we have a bit of a jump on the market here. You're just trying to assess the relative strength of your bet, and also manage the psychology. But yeah, none of those things are at the mercy of an algorithm.
Yeah, okay. That's surprising. I actually had this idea in my head that it was very sort of numbers driven. So it's interesting to learn that. There's obviously periods where you do have a bit of a downturn or a downswing in the bankroll. Could be due to just purely getting unlucky or other reasons. How do you sort of determine when things aren't going your way, whether that is just in fact bad luck or there's something that needs to be changed?
Good question. Look, I think there's always things that need a change, even when you're winning. One thing, I don't know how to call them, the brain trust that StarLizard would sort of, come for me for this, but I was somewhat frustrated there that they would wait, so long, literally tens of thousands of bets before they'd consider a bias in the model being the issue. The issue was always variance until, basically Tony had enough. So they were very, very patient and trusting of their models. And look, rightly so, they've delivered like unfathomably good results over such a long period of time. And variance is a devastating thing, and it can play with you massively. My approach was always a bit different, and if I went on a losing run, it's not like I'd break the model. I'd just be thinking, right, what could I be doing better? Does this make sense? And I would always be going back into it. Obviously, it's more natural to do it when you're losing. That's when you've really got the motivation. And just apply that process of trial and error. I think Taleb said you need at least 1,000 IQ points to beat trial and error. So I kind of played by that, and it's got me out of a few, probably that process and, that sort of desperate search, not like I'm data mining or something, but I'm just reapplying myself. It's important even just to make a few cosmetic changes, just to snap out of the rut psychologically, and just think, okay, I've changed 1 or 2 things, look, nothing's probably wrong. It's also good to make these checks to reaffirm that nothing is wrong, or, possibly it is variance. But yeah, I didn't like losing, and I'd really knuckle down when as happens every single year at a certain point, the bets don't go your way.
I'd love to move on to some of the challenges and opportunities before we open up broadly for questions. One of the questions that was really top of mind for me was just hiring in this space. Like, it seems like a very sort of specialized niche skill set. Is it difficult to hire people to come and work with you?
Good question. I mean, the team I've assembled, and virtually all of them work on tennis itself. The ton of tennis experts is absolutely outstanding. There are guys in that team who have taught me unbelievable amounts. I mean, it is difficult, but these people, you've got, these, I don't know.
Do you find that they find you or you find them?
So, I mean, I post sort of on a few tennis forums where sort of people like me sort of hang out. And I think I posted there in sort of like 2019, and just left my email address and a tiny bit about what that job was, and it's evolved even over time. And so, yeah, over the years, I've had lots of people reach out with sort of applications, and we'd sit down together on like a Zoom call and watch some tennis together and discuss, what we're seeing on the stream. I'd ask if they play tennis. Some of them would be college players in the US. Some of them would be parents who are coaching their, like one of their children to a very high level. And I was really looking for people who combination of either knowing the sport at a professional level really well, or understanding the game and the structure and fabric of points extremely well. And yeah, some of the guys are just mind-boggling. I'm not gonna. I could name a lot of them. There's obviously a few guys that have worked with me all of this time and really stand out. So yeah, massive shout out to them. It is difficult to hire because it's something so peculiar and specific, and you can't really train people for what I'm asking them to do. They basically need thousands of hours of sort of tennis in their life sort of experience in the bank. But yeah, I'm massively grateful to them, and I'm really pleased that we've lasted this long.
We've got a lot of questions on AI. Is this development, is that something that you see impacting the world of professional betting for good or bad? Is there any sort of near-term impact to the business, or do you think it's maybe a trend you can take advantage of better than others?
Sorry, Mike, I'm just thinking about this one. I don't think sports betting is sort of bang in the wheelhouse of AI as I see it evolving over the next year or so. I think it's slightly pointless to speculate beyond that, because we've already seen, we've already been surprised so much in the last, say, 2.5, 3 years by what's happened. I guess what I'm getting at is to bet effectively, you just simply need to aggregate information from too many sort of disparate sources. And that particular function is a little bit difficult for AI. You also need some sort of domain knowledge to apply within your modeling. There will be random spurious results that come out of pieces of analysis, which someone who watches tennis can basically call out and say, look, this may be true statistically in the past, but I wouldn't expect it to carry on because of X, Y, and Z. And an AI that is just left to sort of optimize on data can fall into that trap and produce a poor model in the sort of, out of sample case. But look, you can play this back to me in 2 years' time when I'm completely gone. So then this is my take at the moment. Is it's not quite there. Let's see.
Yeah, sure. We had a question from Jams who said, do you see yourself diversifying into other sports, or is tennis the main focus for the foreseeable future?
Someone asked me at dinner today about cricket, and they're saying, "Oh, you could do the same thing on cricket." And I said, I said to him, my top score as a cricketer, as a batsman, was 13. That's 13 runs. It's my best ever score at the crease. So I couldn't tell you watching a cricket match if the guy has top edged it for 6 or he's just middled it for 6. I don't know. So look, the only other sport that I have played to a good enough standard to interpret properly is football. And I think we all know how challenging that market is, and I have no intention of getting involved anytime soon. Look, I don't know how to say this. There's a line in a J. Cole song. He's a rapper from the US, and he goes, "I'm not trying to survive. I'm trying to put my mama in rides." Where he's basically so ambitious, he doesn't give a shit. He just wants, his goal is to buy his mum the best car ever. I'm not like that. I just want to survive. And tennis is more than enough for me at the moment.
We've got a related question from Kingsley. He asks, do you think the same modelling process would be successful in horse racing, or do you put down your success to deep knowledge of tennis?
I think he guessed from what I've said already.
Yeah.
It's definitely the domain knowledge is extremely important. I'll give you, just to expand on that a bit. There came a point in 2022 when I started betting on women's. So we're 2020 and 2021 is just purely doing men's, because that's kind of what I've been watching growing up, and virtually all of the players were sort of, very familiar to me. I started betting on women's, and it was a brutal experience actually for a few months. I've never really looked back to see just how bad those bets were, but I didn't have that domain knowledge to help me filter out, bad spots and correct the model. And I had guys, guys who worked with me for years coming to me going, "Tom, I'm not doing the women's anymore." And that's because the domain knowledge was non-existent. Now, going back to where we were at the very beginning, I said, look, I'd rather just lose money and work it out than paper trade and pretend I'm a genius by tweaking all the parameters and making money on a spreadsheet. In the end, the way out was just to stream WTA sort of every hour of the day and just absorb it, suck it up, listen to my team, it took me maybe a few years, but I think it's at the same level as the men's now, I think. So domain knowledge is crucial.
We'll go into the Q&A part now, and we've got a ton of questions. Probably won't get time for them all, but I'll just start throwing them at you, Tom, and feel free to pass if it's not something you can answer, and we'll move on to the next one. We've got a question from Jack, who asked, what are the best books or podcasts for aspiring sports bettors? Any recommendations?
Great question. I didn't see this one coming. It's sorry, Jack. Let me think. the book which changed everything for me was, and it doesn't feed into betting, exactly, but it's Taleb's The Black Swan. I don't know how to really relate how important that book was to me. There's a quote, I can't remember who said it, it's not in the book itself, but the purpose of books or literature is they're like an ice axe to break the frozen sea within us. And Taleb's book, I was reading this as like 19 years old, and it was like a revelation that all the world was, there was so much nonsense out there peddled as sort of expertise. And you may think, well, what's that relevant to betting? He'd worked as a trader. There's a ton of very interesting anecdotes. And obviously as a, probabilistic sort of, it's kind of a combination of, philosophy and study of uncertainty and things like that. It doesn't map perfectly onto betting, definitely not. But it changed an awful lot for me. Nate Silver's written a book which I read when I graduated. It's quite funny. I probably never finished a history book at university. And then one day after my last exam, I probably finished Nate Silver's book in one sitting. I was very green at this point, but I just wolfed it down. It was really interesting. So I just start with those two and just keep reading.
I've got a question from Warren who's asking if you bet in play.
We don't have any in-play models. It's basically, all of our sort of reporting and data we are creating based on video downloads and streams that the team will assess sort of after the match has finished and before the player plays again. So we don't have any sort of architecture where we're kind of piping this data in live. So we could bet live based on the same feeds that other people use, but we sort of be without our biggest asset, which is our data. There's a little bit I do in Grand Slams where it's honestly just for fun and especially in the men's where you get these 5-set matches. I honestly, I'm not even sure if I have an edge, but I really, really enjoy doing it. It's probably 1 or 2% of our volume.
We've got a question from Shane who is asking, when you meet resistance in the market, do you adjust your ratings?
Oh, great question. So I mean, the way I sort of understand ratings is, some number in sort of Tom space that represents how good a player is, in different scenarios. I wouldn't directly adjust those ratings, but because, what it might mean is there's something about this one particular match that I've misevaluated. It would definitely give me pause for thought with respect to that particular bet. It depends how you fared against that particular sort of strand or theme, that particular sort of resistance historically. It depends what you think, how predictable that resistance is. If you're kind of expecting, the market not to know something, then it's very normal to get that resistance because they're not going to know something and you do. If you think it's a fairly standard scenario and someone is betting violently against you, then probably you're the person who doesn't know something and you should back off, or definitely, not necessarily stand down, but retreat your to take a more favorable number. Personally, for me, it also just depends on confidence. Betting in first rounds can be different to betting in, say, quarterfinals when you've seen that player play 3 or 4 matches already in the tournament, and the chance of some completely sort of exogenous information is much less. But yeah, you'd be an absolute fool to plow headlong into resistance, because everyone's out here trying to make money, and there's a very good chance that if you're not careful, they'll be making it out of you. So yeah.
We've had a few questions on where you sort of allocate your time and your bets in regards to, say, ITF, Challenger, ATP. Is there any sort of space that you focus on, or is it just a bit of everything?
Yeah, I mean, we this season has been almost all ATP and WTA. We used to do a lot more challenges, but I just found it's a better use of my time to have the most thorough process possible for those ATP and WTA bets, and pick off challenger bets much more sort of selectively. And then it's very hard to bet on ITF because there's just no serious market for that. Bookmakers are not going to get two-way action, so they're not offering any limits. There's probably integrity issues. So yeah, I mean, this season, more so than all the others, it's been really concentrated at the top levels. That sort of answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Look, we might wrap it there. We've had unlimited questions, which I think we take as a compliment that what you're doing is very interesting, Tom. But we'll let you go back to it. It's pretty late over there now. So just on behalf of everyone joining today, thanks so much for sharing your insights. And also just on behalf of the investors, thanks for all your hard work. And, we're very pleased to have a small share in your hard work and your success.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you, Tom, for joining.
Cheers, guys.